This is how to communicate effectively with your children, which I think is relatable for everyone, whether you are co-parenting, whether you're parenting, doesn't matter. If you're a parent, I'm excited for this one.
This is important. Yeah.
This is right.
Here are some like practical things that you can do.
Yeah. You just have 4 specific tips we're going to get into.
Yeah.
So why don't we start this off with welcome to 12-Week Relationships. This is your place for better relationships in weeks, not years. When we say relationships, we mean all of them. Starting with the one you have with yourself and working on outwards. And specifically, today's episode is about your relationship with your children, if you have kids. My name is Pye. This is my wonderful friend and guest, Amanda Lee. You can check her out on Instagram at mymommytheartist, as well as mymommytheartist.com, right?
Yes.
And you can help me in convincing her to put all this awesome artwork and everything into books, because as parents, we need them. But specifically, you specialize in kind of, well, you've turned this into your thing, where basically you're taking these awesome messages that we all need to learn in terms of mental health and personal growth, and you're putting them into artwork and comics, basically. Like, is it illustrations?
Illustrations, yeah.
For children.
Right.
Which is incredible.
So it's understandable for them. And honestly, a lot of adults just like it for themselves, because they're like, yeah, that was a very overcomplicated concept, and that's all you really need to know is what if a kid can understand it, an adult can understand it.
It's fantastic on both sides. It's fantastic. And a quick side note, this is part 3 of our series with Amanda. So if you haven't checked out part 1, we go kind of into, well, her backstory in terms of what led her into a very young marriage, what that was like, and what it was like coming out of that with kids. And then in part 2, we went into this, how do we each deal with this toxic co-parenting dynamic?
Right.
Now, I think this is more of the fun stuff. We get to talk about specifically communicating with kids.
Yeah. And actually, this is what I actually help coach parents on, really, is because you're going to hear these and you might be like, oh, yeah, that's fantastic. I'm going to do it. But in the heat of the moment, when you are facing that child, and you have your stresses and your feelings and all that's going on right here, and so do they, it doesn't come out naturally.
When you're annoyed and frustrated, and you just got home from work and all
you're
these
tired.
things are going on.
And oftentimes, if you are all touched out, like you're just like, oh, the kids there's too much, you're overwhelmed. Some of these tips they don't come naturally to us, especially if we were raised in a household where we were reprimanded for voicing an opinion or reprimanded for acting on a feeling, And so I just want to start by saying that, like, the reason why I got into this is because, or one of the reasons, there's so many, but one of the things is, if we could talk about love, the idea of love, right? We're on a 12-week relationships podcast. Love is real, true love is where you go to become the best version of, like, where you can be the best version of you. Like, you're compromising who you are to please your partner, your parent. That's not love. If your love is dependent on your behavior,
sure,
it's conditioned or conditional.
Yeah.
Then it's not really love, right?
Yeah.
Now, that is almost more spoken about in terms of romantic relationships, but this is absolutely true with children as well. So our job as parents is to help foster who they are, not to turn them into either a version of us that we wanted to be and it didn't happen, or we want them to turn into us, right? So there's a huge part of parenting that really has to do with just your own work on yourself also, and just getting to an emotionally healthy place yourself, that you are in a place that you love yourself, because that's what we want for our kids. We don't want our kids to grow up just listening to you and having your opinions and then being afraid to show you who they really are, because they're going to be shunned or, met with anger if they try to express who they are. So
it's funny that we have kids in terms of like the human lifespan, right?
Yeah.
We usually have kids when we're still figuring that stuff out for ourselves.
Exactly.
It's not as if we live to be 300 years old and we have kids when we're 100 and after we're already, like, we're still figuring it out.
And I will say this is not one of the steps right here, but this is one of the things, is that you don't have to have it figured out to have kids, but you do have to. This is where clear communication with kids is so important, because you know what? It is okay to not only okay, it is necessary to apologize to your child and say, I'm working on this. I am so many parents out there, and I've had clients before that struggle because they don't want to seem like they don't have, like, that they have any weakness to their child.
Yeah.
But you know what? If we do that, then our children are going to grow up thinking we don't have any weaknesses. And if they have a weakness, there's something wrong with them.
For sure.
So we also need to model excellent emotional health and intelligent behavior, which is, wow, I really messed that up, bud. Can we do that again? I'm really, really sorry. Can we do that again?
Yeah.
Like, that's one of the things in speaking to our children that is crucial, actually.
To apologize, to actually take
to
ownership.
Apologize, and not to make excuses for what you're apologizing for, right? Like, meaning, like, to be honest, but also give them just enough information, but like not too much. You don't have to go into all the details, but they need to know that you respect them so much that you will apologize to them too.
The funny thing to me is, on the subject of parenting, I haven't read, nearly as many parenting books as relationship books, and my study on that subject isn't as broad by any means. But at the same time, I do feel like, from what I've read, I often feel like parenting is very much overcomplicated. That there's a simplicity in the fact that your children will do what you do.
Right.
And beyond that, spend time with them. Spend time with them and know that they're going to do what you do. So if you want them to play piano, be a good idea for you to play piano. If you want them to, do jujitsu, be a great idea to do it with them.
Right.
But it's difficult to get them to do things that you yourself are not modeling.
Right.
And then knowing that, I don't understand why parenting books don't approach it from the standpoint of personal growth. Like, if you want to be a good parent, hey, dummy, work on these things yourself. But it doesn't feel like those books are that way. It feels like they're more surface level techniques. And so I really love what you're saying so far in terms of, like,
this is it's respectful parenting is what, and it will yield the same results. You don't have to discipline and punish and all that stuff. In fact, those have now been proven to show that there's adverse effects, right? And so all it is really, if you can, it's tough because our egos can get in the way, right? Like, we want our kids to be oftentimes, so some parents would like to use their children as like trophies. Like, look how well, if I can show you my kid is well behaved, that means I'm doing a good job.
So weird.
Right?
Yes.
It is weird, but it's also super common.
And it's very common.
And where we need to heal that is, what is it about my own life that I'm not proud of that I have to use my children to be the trophy?
Yeah. Why do you communicate your value?
Or
through
where's
your kids?
and what is my worth?
Yeah.
Right. And if you're confused about what your worth is, go take a look. Right. And then go fill your own cup. Again, it's the same concept of, if you can imagine filling your own cup and then the overflow flows onto your children. It's not giving so much of yourself that you are depleted. You have nothing left to give the children if you are depleted. And I don't mean just sleeping and an occasional spa day. I'm talking about emotional health right here.
So you have a 4-step approach that you take parents through, right?
Yes.
What is step 1?
And then we practice this because it is hard. But step 1 is very, very easy to do. And you can do this if you are angry. You're about to lose it. They've been asking you how many times, like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Hey, Dad, are we there yet? Why? She hit me. Like, stuff like this, right? And you're about to lose your head and you're about to lose your cool. So step number 1, literally repeat back to them what they just said to you. So here's an example. She hit me, right? You respond with, she hit you? Now, this is very weird for some people. They're like, what is that going to do? But let me tell you something. I'm trying to take the stress out of parenting a crisis at the moment, okay? All you have to do is just repeat back what they said to them, because guess what they feel at that moment is they feel heard. And that's all they need at that moment. They will keep talking, and this is what I meant by a child-led conversation. They will keep talking if you are hearing them, right? So this is very unnatural for most people, and this is why we have to practice, right? A lot of parents are fixers who just want to jump in and be like, well, who did that first? Who did it? Like, right? And like, get to the story. No, you know what? We don't even know why they just said she hit me, right? He could be confused about this or confused about that or worried about this, or teddy bear got lost, or that one kid at school said this 4 days ago, and this is how it's coming out. So we need to find out exactly why that's coming out. But when you don't have the capacity to do that, All you do is literally repeat back to them what they just said. Because when they feel heard, which actually this works with adults too.
Mm-hmm.
When they feel
You're
heard,
parroting.
they will feel safe,
Yeah.
and they feel heard, and they feel seen, right? And then they will open up more. So it works with kids, but it's kind of hard at first because you gotta shove that idea of, let me help fix this. Oh my gosh, I gotta calm this situation down. Like, you stop that, you come here, you do that, because you're stressed out or whatever. So yes, parroting. That's parroting. Is that what you called it?
Yeah, parroting is a really effective technique in a lot of different situations.
Right.
Like, I mean, you can literally use it throughout everything, but it's a great way to carry forward a conversation, especially if, in moments where you're distracted, maybe you didn't hear the last piece of something.
Yep.
You simply say back the last thing you heard.
Exactly.
Oh, so you're saying that the first step is to repeat back what they said, like in this case.
Go. Yep.
And then it hands the conversation back to you to then continue.
Yep.
So this is a really effective use of parroting for the children.
And when you're angry, this is completely doable because you don't even have to think about solving the problem. Don't think about solving the problem at that moment because you don't actually know what the problem is. What parents often do is they try to jump in to solve a problem that wasn't even the problem to begin with, but they're just trying to diffuse the situation because more often than not, like I said, parenting is very triggering. If you come from a home where you were not heard, you might feel like, I don't even know how to respond to this right now. So step number 1, literally say back to them what they just said to you. And they will continue talking or whatever. Then you can get to the source of what's actually happening.
Yeah. The thing is that we're instinctually hardwired to want to conserve energy, to want to get get to the solution, get to the place we want to go with the least amount of energy used. We're always in that conservation of calorie mode.
Right.
So a lot of times the snappy responses are like going back at the kids with, well, who started this? Or it's an attempt to quickly solve the problem, but that actually ends up spending more energy, more time in doing so.
In fact, you're probably not solving the problem. All you're doing is making it more peaceful for you. So
if that.
But like as if, or to give yourself this false sense of, I did something about this.
Yeah.
So
I think that's what it is.
Right.
You think you're parenting.
Right. Or what I meant by, you think you're diffusing a situation as if you're in public, right? And you're like embarrassed because, oh my gosh, my kids are arguing again and they're slapping each other or something, right? Like, I bet you all these people think I'm so bad and that's oftentimes why we want to diffuse a situation real quick, but we're not doing it right because we're like, okay, well, if you said, why don't you apologize? Or you punish both kids or something. And this is very hard for kids because they're like, you don't even know what just happened.
Yeah.
And all you're doing is coming in here because you're a bigger human than I am and punishing me for something that I didn't even do.
It makes them feel unsafe for having a problem.
Absolutely. Right? And unsafe for expressing that they had a problem. And this is also why a whole bunch of adults right now, right, if we were raised in environments like that, we have a hard time even pinpointing what emotion we're feeling.
Yeah.
Well, why do you think that is? Is because we were not given a safe space to express that.
Yeah.
Because any negative expression of feeling was reprimanded or you were punished for. Like crying, for example. You have no idea why a child is crying or screaming or throwing a tantrum. We don't. It could be that they felt so bad about doing something, but then we're going to be like, go to your room, right? And also, which side note here, go to your room and isolating them is when they're having big feelings, is very confusing for them because they can't even figure out what's happening on their own. What they need is somebody to hold their hand and tell them that they're loved. It's okay to feel this way, and it's okay. We're on the same team. Let's figure this out together. Instead of go figure it out, and you can't come back until you figured it out because they can't ever come back.
Yeah.
All they learn to do is suppress what they're actually feeling, so that they look like they can come back and join you because they're calm now. But what actually happened inside is they learned, okay, Mom and Dad get mad if I get angry. So next time I feel angry, I'm just going to hide it. Otherwise, they're going to get mad and I won't get to watch on my iPad, right? Like that's what they're learning. They're not learning how to sort out what's happening. They're learning how to survive in the home without getting yelled at.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you take away, I think we oftentimes discipline kids with the mindset that they have the ability to logic and reason their way through a problem set.
Right.
But they don't. So if you think about like training an animal instinctually, if you think about it in the sense of like an animal's thought process in general, like a dog's thought process in general is going to be, if I do this, this will happen. Therefore, don't do this.
Right.
And you don't sit there and reason with a dog and like sit there and communicate, in complex form and fashion of why they should be, because they can't understand that.
Right.
And oftentimes feel like there's a point in time when a child is so young that they behave more like that animal, where it's like we sit there and expect them that if I put you in a timeout, that you'll be able to sit and reason through something. Yeah. No, it's an instinctual process of I did this, I got put in timeout, therefore don't do this.
Yep.
As they get older, you build more logic and reasoning into things. But I agree with you that there's no point to like, they're not equipped to, even as a 8-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, they're not equipped to sit there and logic their way through something.
Right.
And the expectation of them being able to do that, no, you're really just letting them sit in their trauma.
Right. And they're learning how to hide it from you.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, there are many adults who don't even know how to do this.
For sure.
Right. And so why do we have
as a child, right?
keyboard warriors, right? Who just lash out at strangers for no reason? Why do we have issues with road rage? Why do we have issues, why do there's so many mental health issues with adults who can't regulate their own emotions, right? So it's like, how can we expect that of someone smaller? Just because we're like, perhaps your bad behavior is a reflection on me as a person, right? So again, back to this though, step number 1 is making sure they feel seen, heard, appreciated. And the easiest way to do that is parroting.
Parrot.
Yep. So same thing, like, I hate when sister does this. Oh, you hate when sister does this? But question form, right? You see how I just did that, but like question form. That's it. Next thing they say, yeah, she always takes my folder and she never puts it back. Wow. She always takes your folder and she never puts it back? I mean, it kind of sounds silly, but it 100% works all the time. Okay. And then step number 2. Okay. Now, also, I want you to notice my tone there. There was zero judgment, emotion, anything. I'm not deciding for her or him how to feel about this, or them. I'm not deciding for them how to feel about this. I'm just saying, oh, is that like gathering facts, right? We're very factual. You're not like, oh, she took your folder? And because that's also making them feel like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be angry right now. They're taking cues from you, right? So very calm, non-judgmental tone. And then the next is to rephrase, or what I'm hearing you say is...
So step 2.
This is step 2. So trying to understand what they are saying in your words, right? And then this also works with other adults, right? And your partner, what you want to say is, what I'm hearing you say is, and then you give them your version of what you heard, because oftentimes we're wrong. What we heard is a projection of what we, oftentimes we're human, right? So
our interpretation of it.
And so we can offer that to them, and then we may or may not be right. We may or may not be wrong. And then let them, again, this is also done in a very kind, gentle manner, right? We're not, no you words. You are da-da-da-da-da. You are feeling. So I'm just saying, what I'm hearing you say is that it feels very unfair to da-da-da-da-da, et cetera. And then making sure that you're talking about the same thing. Because again, how can we expect a child to be able to communicate with you 100% what they're feeling when most adults can't even do that?
Yeah.
Right. When we are stressed out about something, we don't even quite know why we're upset about something without doing a little digging, if we're self-aware enough to do a little digging, right? And so it is bananas to expect that a child can articulate to you exactly what they're feeling at that moment. So we want to try, right? We're reaching out. Step number 3 can be used and this is dependent upon your relationship with your child. But step number 3, I wouldn't necessarily put it in this order, but it's something called co-regulation. Have you heard of co-regulation? Okay, so often done with babies, right? It is how a baby calms down its nervous system, is some form of touch, eye contact, soft voice, right? And then your nervous system and their nervous system, you're calm together.
It's kind of holding their hands and saying, okay, let's breathe.
Right. And honestly, you don't even need to say much with co-regulation. It is more of a feeling is what I want to say. Now, you can also do co-regulation with your romantic partner, which is actually very, very effective. But I won't have to talk about that right now. But so when I say co-regulation in terms of a child, it is your body language and your nervous system regulation in this conversation. So you don't want to come into this frazzled and you're trying to calm down like a not calm person trying to calm down a not calm person, right? Yeah. This is not going to work. So self-regulation is very important here. You have to, this is what I work with clients on too, is your own ability to calm your nervous system down so that you can be the safe base for them. We don't want to add chaos to chaos because this is not going to get anywhere. So with co-regulation, oftentimes it is meeting them at eye level, contact if they consent to it. Don't try to just hug them for no reason, consent if they feel like it. Because sometimes when they're frazzled, they don't want you to touch them, So this is really important. So like I said, it's not necessarily step 3. It's kind of like you figure it out with your kid at what point you can have this sort of connection, right? It could be through step 3 could happen while step 1 is happening, right? But all you're trying to do is be a safe harbor for them so that they can feel your positive and receptive energy.
I feel like co-regulation is a very critical step throughout the process because of oftentimes the kids will they become like hyperactive to those emotions where they can't even, their nervous system is going so wild that they can't even regulate or think and they get into that place where they're like you can hear it, like where they can't breathe, they can't talk, they can't. And for us, the easiest way for me to do that is say, hey, come here, kiddo. And to put them around the knee and kind of hold them and to say, okay, let's breathe for a second. It's okay. You don't need to say anything yet. Just relax.
So here are some words that you can say, in that moment. One of the things that, I wanted to talk about breath work for a second. There's something that to be said about just you don't necessarily need to say breathe, because when I'm frazzled and somebody says, just take a breath, I'm like, yeah, no, like don't tell me what to do. Like I can't deal with this right now. So with co-regulation is if you are breathing deeply and then you're doing it with them, right? So just say breathe with me or something, like something where you're pulling them in. And there's something super powerful about if you're touching in some way and you are breathing together. Yeah. Then you're regulating that together instead of just saying, just relax. Also, that doesn't work with anybody. So don't tell anybody to just relax.
Just relax is not a good way to calm
relax doesn't work,
down.
Especially with kids. Also, they're probably not hearing you. When you're saying anything, when they're in that moment where you just demonstrated where they're like, their breath is so short, they're not hearing anything that you're saying. And if you're giving them more instructions, that's just adding to their chaos now.
I'll mirror it with them. So I'm usually touching my chest and doing that.
Or like you can put your hand on their chest with their consent, of course, and then you do it. Like one thing that I do with my kiddo is, her hand is on mine and my hand is on her chest. And that's how so there's like a physical
That's a good point to use more of the demonstration, the physical versus the
instead of like,
language.
This is what you do. Take a deep breath, hold for 5, like, no. Right. Like eventually you can teach them those techniques to do on their own. But at that moment they need you because they're so frazzled. So if you try to solve the problem before co-regulation, right? If you're like, well, let's just put your folder back. I'll just get you a new folder, right? This is what parents want to do, right? Guess what? They're not hearing anything and they're not processing anything, and you are adding to the chaos. Like, oh my gosh, mom wants me to solve this problem right now. How do I, like there's just too much happening. So what we need to do is slow everything down for them.
We talk about this a lot in adults, which is so kids get frazzled at things that we wouldn't react to, right? And that's why as adults, I think it's difficult to understand.
Yes.
But if you imagine the moments where you get triggered, where you get angry, where the body's going into a sympathetic response. So your nervous system takes over and you're actually being disconnected from the reasoning center of the brain.
Right.
Why? Because again, early humans, when you're in an actual life or death situation, there's no time to think. The people that stop to reason in those moments, they are not our ancestors. They didn't live long enough to become our ancestors. So we've been biologically programmed that the sympathetic nervous system is going to take over in these moments of stress.
Right.
And we're either going to fight, we're going to flight, or we're going to fight, freeze,
and
fly. Yeah. So you're going to do one of those 3 things, but there is no logic in it. It's a completely different part of the body.
Exactly.
So this is why telling an adult calm down doesn't work. It doesn't work. Why, just relax.
So much less a child.
Yeah. Much less a child. Right. So until you can basically turn off the sympathetic response and go to a parasympathetic, which is the logic and reasoning center, there's no point in communicating anything. And same thing with an adult.
I want like people to think about this for a second too, how scary it is when you're overwhelmed by a feeling. So when you're a kid and you've never felt jealousy before, right? If you're a kid and you've never felt disappointment before, and that's your first time feeling disappointment. And then you don't even know how to react to that, right? You're like, oh my gosh, like there's this new feeling and it's coming at me and I don't even know how to deal with this. So you might cry. Yeah. You might shout because you're scared. What do people do out of fear, right? They are going to cry. They're going to scream out of fear. But then as parents, we're like, oh my gosh, I'm like, why are you crying? Yeah. My God. And then that right there is, one, we're not helping them process what's happening. But two, it's also like, we're not accepting you if you're not happy. And that is one of the biggest, most dangerous things, right? Like, we'll only love you if you're happy. We'll only love you if you're quiet right now. We'll only love you if you can come back from your room and you're not crying anymore, right? So like if you can imagine sending a child to their room for having a feeling, and then in their room, they're acting out, throwing things because that's the only way they know how, or that's how they're expressing it. And then you go and yell at them for that. Mm-hmm. What did that just teach them? Absolutely nothing. In fact, now they feel a little scared and they don't fit. Now, when I say that, I don't mean that if you've done that, it's over. Like you've messed them up. Like it's not like that at all, because guess what? We're also human. But this also goes back to what I said earlier about apologizing. Mm-hmm. You can apologize and should apologize to your children and say, I did not handle that very well. Mm-hmm. I was feeling this. Keep it simple, right? I was feeling this and I didn't. Can I please have a do-over? And then you can, again, follow the steps where you listen to them. This is what I'm hearing you say. And with the co-regulation, well, the goal is to decrease the stress in the home, right? And then step number 4, which I'm sure you've spoken about this on your podcast because you say this to partners. Would you like comfort or would you like a solution? A lot of people, when they're parents, don't think that they need to offer both. Guess what? You don't. Your kid may not need a solution at that moment. They may not. They may need it later, and they will come tell you when they need it later. But at that moment, again, if you can just imagine it's your brain, but just a little less mature. Yeah. Maybe they can't handle a solution right now, and they don't want it because all they want is to know that they're loved and that it's okay what they just did. Not okay what they just did. I'm not saying that we're going to condone hitting and things like that. There's ways to handle that too, but I'm saying that they are being accepted and loved. Yeah. That's the feeling that they have is absolutely okay and normal, and it's okay. But and then you can talk about but this is what you can't do. We don't hit, yada, yada, yada. I
like that. I use that technique often. I have to use that with Yen because I don't know in my partnership. I don't know the moments where, Yen wants me to just listen or when a solution is asked for. So I have to use that. Yeah. But I never thought about using it with the kids. And that's a really great tip.
It goes back to the idea of if they're not ready to receive that information right now, and then we don't even honor their own ability to make decisions for themselves, and we're just hurling advice at them. Like, what relationship does that work in where you're just hurling advice at somebody? It doesn't work, right? So what we're trying to do with respectful parenting is respect them. Mm-hmm. Hey, you have a say here too. You have a say in whether or not you want me to come help you solve this problem. Because guess what? I'm an adult. I can help you solve this problem. Let's say it was about the folder or whatever, and we can talk about that. But maybe right at this very moment, we have to respect the individuality of our children. Some children handle things this way. Some children handle things this way because they're human. We're all different. And so we have to respect that. And so if we give them an option, right? I'm always about giving options because you don't want to leave too many open-ended things with kids, right? So you want to give them an option. So would you like me to help you with that right now? Like find a solution? Or would you like some more comfort? And what does that look like, right? Let them choose. They might even be confused at first, like, what do you mean? Or whatever. But this is when you give options, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah, I also love, and you do this you've discussed this already here, but you also do this incredibly well in your work.
Thank you.
Which is communicating on levels. And I don't understand why oftentimes we fail to do this as parents and with dealing with children, or because we do it in other formats. Like, let's say, for example, I've done a lot of photography education, right? Mm-hmm. When someone first picks up a camera, the advice that I'm going to give them is very different than the advice I would give someone who's 10 years into their career.
Yeah.
What I say, like someone that's 10 years into it, I would say, okay, what is the actual story that's occurring here? Because compositionally, this isn't leading into the story you're trying to tell. And there's a disconnect between color and the actual theory and feeling of the image versus what you're attempting to convey. Right. So it doesn't hit.
You've already lost me.
Yeah, you say that to someone that just picked up a camera, they're like, what?
Right.
Like, what the hell did you say?
Exactly.
No, when someone just picks up a camera, it's like, okay, this image is a bit too bright.
Mm-hmm.
This is how you darken it.
Right.
This image is this.
Yep.
This is why.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we go to our kids expecting them to be able to reason oftentimes. And,
Right.
in no other format do we do this. We don't.
No.
There's always a layering. And so what I love
Right.
about your work is you're taking these complex things, but then you've converted it into a language that not only a child can understand, but even an adult can go, I never thought about it that way. That's really nice and easy.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. I think it is very important we tend to over explain for our children for whatever reason, right? We're like, oh no, you need to know this now. You need to know this.
Yeah.
You know, like we're so worried that, oh, if you don't learn this lesson now, that, oh no, you know, again, I think it's largely a reflection on you. And so you're like panicking a little bit. But I think that as parents, our role is to stand there and love them and watch them and guide them. We're not telling them what to do, but we are guiding them. And the only way that they will trust your advice is if they feel that you love them.
Yeah.
You can't scare a child into loving you. You can't scare a child into doing something because then they don't actually know what the reason is why they're doing something.
For sure.
Right. And so if love has to be the reason why, and they need to feel that way, like, okay, I can act this way and mom will love me no matter what. And mom will forgive me no matter what. And mom's not perfect either. So we're all kind of doing this together, right?
Yeah.
So.
And every principle that is taught needs to be taught in this layering format of simplicity. To one extra layer of added complexity.
Right.
And I remember when my kids were 5 and we had separated, I never really even talked about what divorce was. I just said, you know, your mom and I it wasn't healthy, kiddos, so we're not together anymore. That's it. And then when they were 7 years old, 6 and 7 years old, it was more like, okay, so yeah, not being together, that means that we're not married anymore. You guys remember what marriage is? And then when they're 8 and 9, then it's, okay, so this is why sometimes two people get divorced. But each phase, you know, you're layering complexity on the message and not just going straight to, okay, kids, in this situation, we're going to use breathing techniques because this will take you out of the parasympathetic.
Right,
this
exactly.
will bring you into a parasympathetic response system because right now this is a nervous system.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess that's kind of what I love about the work that you're doing is all of these messages are communicated within that. Maybe you can give some examples of some of these illustrations that you're doing and the way that you approach these subjects.
Okay, yeah, sure. So one of the ones that I'm actually going to be posting soon is so just, you got to use your imagination here for a second, but it is just imagine a kid and he has a little fuzzy monster that's happy. Okay. Yeah. It's representative of actually your intuition.
Oh,
and so this concept is for, it's adorable. But this is actually for parents to understand how to like respectful parenting. So this is what happens in the story is the little kid has a little monster and the mom tells the kid to do something. And then the monster says, I don't know if this is a good idea, right? It's not something like put your dishes away, okay? It is like something like go kiss this uncle goodbye or something. And the monster says, I don't feel so good about this. And so the kid says, I don't feel, says to mom, I don't feel good about this. Something doesn't feel right. And then mom turns around and is angry, meets this situation with anger. Intuition, our fuzzy, cute monster, goes and hides.
Go give your uncle a hug.
Yeah. So then intuition learns, I'm going to go hide. Yeah. And then another scenario happens where a similar thing has happened. And then the kid asks the intuition, like, what do you think about this? And intuition's like, well, and then he's like, you know what? I better not listen to you. Last time I listened to you, I got yelled at. So then this intuition gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So all of this is visual, right? So what I'm trying to illustrate is when we are not listening to our children, they are not listening to themselves either.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, on my post, I always write a thing about like, in what scenarios that this would work, obviously, right? Like, we're not just going to be like, oh, well, you don't feel like doing the dishes right now because your intuition, it's not like that, right? Like there's ways that you can address all of these things, right? And so that's just one of the examples. Yeah. And so, I once also, one of my very first drawings was also, did I mention this one already? The house with the gate, right?
Yeah, I love that one. The boundaries.
Yeah. And then about really just what a good friend is. Not only you setting your boundaries, but what a good friend is. Because one of the things that I actually try to teach a lot in my drawings and the messages I'm trying to convey is consent.
Yeah.
Not only just in a, sexual way or anything, but honestly in just friendship, right? Like if we want to raise the next generation to not be people pleasing, to actually listen to themselves first, we got to teach them that when somebody tries to come in and take your choice from you, right, manipulates you, shames you into making a decision on your behalf, right, we got to recognize that no, you don't get to come into my house and destroy me, right? Like this is my boundary, and if you are a good person, right, then you will respect that and walk away and come back another time, right? Or if you get angry at me and you shame me for not letting you in, is that a good friend? And so we've had this conversation, my daughter and I, especially because she kept having a run-in with a friend, and she was just like, I've tried to communicate with her, and things like, because these are the things that we need to know now. They need to learn how to do now, before they get into adulthood. So
I see each of these being a brilliant book. Like, I mean, this is just me,
entrepreneur
giving some unsolicited thoughts and advice at this point. But if there was, so if My Mommy the Artist had these books and each one was like maybe, I mean, kids' books don't need to be more than like 20 pages, right? Like each one has maybe 10 concepts that relate to a subject. So My Mommy the Artist on friendships, on confidence.
I actually have one on how to explain divorce.
On divorce. And there was 10 different, concepts and illustrations in each one. I mean, they would be brilliant. I would be buying and pushing these things.
Thank you.
Mad.
I appreciate that.
So
it is about communicating at their level though, right? Because sometimes we want to over explain, and again, it's just understanding who they are and where they are developmentally, but still talking about these important things because they need to know these things,
For sure.
We can't just do a blanket like everybody's friends, la la la. You gotta be kind. You have to share, which is a huge issue. Like, like parents are always like, you have to share, but do you? It's more about not teaching them to share, but because again, this comes back to, we had an earlier discussion about religion when you're scared to do something or you do something out of fear, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Oh, I have manners and I'm sharing because I've been asked to, or are we trying to channel this like innate goodness in your heart that I can share when I want to, but I can also say no because I don't actually want to share my goldfish right now.
Yeah.
And that is also okay. It is okay for me to not have to share my goldfish right now.
Yeah. I actually really enjoy learning on kind of like a children's wavelength.
Yeah, absolutely.
For me, I need to understand the whys of things. And I think that's also why people have appreciated my education over the years, is because I really try to understand why you do something and then break it down in a really simple manner, making complex things simple. And in doing that, I'm really communicating the way that I'm learning the way that a child would, and I'm communicating in a way with like adult concepts, but in a simple and concise fashion.
Yeah.
And I think back to like anything, because I guess what I'm getting at is that I find the analogies and principles just as useful as I think a child would, if not more so. Because when I think of learning anything, like say, for example, jujitsu, the adult classes are great and everything, and our school is fantastic, but I really enjoy the kids classes because in the kids classes, and I'm like, I'm a blue belt. I've done this for a few years and I still enjoy the kids classes because that's where they'll say, okay, when you do this, you bring the arms around the back of the leg and you tuck your head, and this is why. And they'll explain in such a simple manner that I go, oh, okay, that's great. Like I'm learning. And in the adult classes, I probably annoy all the students because I ask like really dumb questions. But the simple truth is that like a lot of people in class will have previous experience in wrestling or other combat sports. So the teacher teaches at a level that if you're like me, I'm an adult, but I have no background in this. I still have a lot of questions, like really, frankly, what would be considered dumb questions to most everybody there, but I don't get it.
Right.
And so I don't know, that there's something about making things simple. And if you can take an adult concept and make it interesting to children, I find a lot of value in that as an adult.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, that's largely why I do what I do, because even with that 4-step thing that we were talking about earlier with communication, right? We're really simplifying how we parent, right? This is what I do with families, is that I teach them that, hey, if we want to remove stress, but we want to increase love here and connection, this is what we're going to do. It's actually quite basic. We don't need to overcomplicate things, right? We don't need to overcomplicate things. And I also make recommendations for books that are already out there, and then specific ideas that I can come up with. And here you can explain it this way, and et cetera, et cetera. So
yeah, love it. Love it. Well, let's go ahead and end this one here.
Okay.
And with the, thought that if you guys want to check out more of Amanda's work, go to My Mommy the Artist.
Please do.
We have .com as well as on Instagram.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And for parents, you offer basically a coaching program for them.
I do.
Right?
Yes. And it is online on Zoom for the moment, because, I also have clients that are all over the place, so we can't exactly meet up. But in these sessions, we really do talk about, we actually practice some of the skills, because like I said, it doesn't come naturally to most people.
Yeah.
And so we do practice, and we do a lot of role playing actually as well, where I will be the child, and then have you practice responding to me, and et cetera, et cetera. So
yeah, knowing an idea and being coached or therapized through it is very different.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that sounds fantastic. But in addition, I would like everybody to help me go onto her Instagram, give her a follow, but help me by commenting that we need these in books. Are you committing here that you're going to turn these into books?
I mean, it's already kind of happening.
Okay, good. Okay, good.
So you can sleep well tonight. You can rest tonight.
I genuinely will be the first person to
I know you will.
And you're going to sign my copy of these books.
Yes.
Okay.
You got it.
You guys heard it. She agreed to it. Here we go.
I promise.
For all of our listeners, thank you for tuning in. We hope you guys enjoyed. And as always, we'd love for you to subscribe to the podcast and newsletter, which you can find at 12weekrelationships.com. And that's it. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.